bathroom.
Yeah, not time for that. So we didn't introduce ourselves to the audience.
They'll hear us, right?
Yeah, but
From WUWM, Milwaukee Public Radio, and Milwaukee Public Television, this is a special edition of Lake Effect. I'm Mitch Teich.
And I'm Joanne Williams. Wisconsin incarcerates a higher percentage of black men than any other state in the country. For the past few months, we've been exploring why this is and what this means to Milwaukee. Today, we'll talk in depth about the impact on our community.
Our Project Milwaukee show today is coming to you live from the Wisconsin Black Historical Society Museum at 27th and Center on Milwaukee's north side. We're in one of the neighborhoods that sees a disproportionate number of its men spend time in prison. We have a live audience with us today to join in the conversation.
And we invite you to take part in this conversation too. You can follow along on Twitter at #PrisonImpact or at facebook.com/WUWM Radio. We have 4 people on the panel to share a variety of perspectives, from a prosecutor who locked up the offenders to 2 people who spent time in prison and a clergyman who has seen his congregation affected. The Reverend Willie Brisco is president of MICAH, Milwaukee Inner City Congregations Allied for Hope. Since 2009, Brisco has been an associate minister of the New Covenant Baptist Church. Brisco was called to the ministry in 2008 after a 25-year career in law enforcement and corrections. Reverend Brisco was born in Mississippi and is a graduate of Milwaukee's North Division High School.
The Reverend Mark Benjamin Evans is a Milwaukee native. He dropped out of college in 1985. In 1988, he was incarcerated for property crimes and assault, and 4 years later, he went to prison for charges related to having non-consensual sex with a former girlfriend. While in prison, Evans became a Christian and obtained a doctorate of divinity. A jury ordered his release in 2011. Today, he's starting a business, writing an autobiography, and is chair of the Faith Committee of the Milwaukee Fatherhood Initiative.
Torre Johnson was born in Milwaukee and spent much of his youth in the city. He became involved in gangs and criminal activity as a teen. At the age of 25, Johnson was charged with first-degree intentional homicide. He received a 10-year sentence. After pleading guilty to a lesser charge, Johnson spent most of his adult life in and out of prison before turning his life around. For the last 6 years, he's worked for Wisconsin Community Services. He currently splits his time among programs at the Holton Youth and Family Center.
And E. Michael McCann was Milwaukee County's district attorney from 1968 to 2006. After retiring from public service, McCann joined Marquette University Law School, where he became a Bowdoin Teaching Fellow and an adjunct professor of law. McCann holds a Master of Laws degree from the Harvard University Law School and honorary degrees from Marquette and Marian College. Welcome to all 4 of you.
Thank you.
Now, let's begin with the question that a lot of people may be asking themselves. Why should we care about the percentage of black men in prison? Why is this of any importance to the people who aren't directly affected? Anybody can answer that?
I can. It's a waste of a human being. It's a human being who could contribute to the society, support a family, hold a job, and enrich the society by their presence, or be a drag on a society. A person going into prison becomes a burden to the whole society. The waste of those resources, I think, is the most, and of course the prison is a terrible place to spend time. So every effort across the board, no matter where it may be, should be made to prevent people, persuade people not to go to prison, not to do things that will put them in prison.
Do you agree? Is it a waste of a perfectly good man to send someone to prison?
It is indeed a waste, but it's a disproportionate amount of black men going into prison compared to other races. So it shows something that we don't like to talk about again. It shows that there's still racism in society. It shows that there's still segregation in society. And it shows that there's one segment of our population that is not growing because the men are not present. And it's not going to succeed without men in the household and men contributing in the community. So if these men are disproportionately in the correctional system, it's going to show that it's going to affect the neighborhoods. They're not going to be healthy. Families are what makes community.
Mark Evans and Torre Johnson, what do you think when you hear someone talk about prison in the context of being a potential waste of a person?
For me, I just understand a little differently. They don't know. I don't think at some rate it's a disappointment, and it's not our natural habitat to be locked away, but there has to be consequences to behavior in order for behavior to change. If there's no consequence to behavior, the behavior is not going to change. But I don't think it's a waste. I think it's a wake-up call, if you will, in a human and other humans that's not directly, I don't think not directly involved is a good phrase to put, because we're all directly involved. It's not one race or another. In my eyesight, it's human race. So I think everyone is directly involved. And so we all should put our energies towards trying to re-baseline that life.
I believe it's a waste if you believe in the word corrections, because there's nothing there that the Department of Corrections put in place for a person that's in prison to correct their life. You know, it's not a waste if the person wake up and realize that he can love himself and save himself, and he wake up and do something to better himself. But if you just say, lock him up and that's it, then it's a waste because we coming back.
Does this have an impact on the greater society, not just the people whose relatives are put in prison or the people in a particular neighborhood? Does it have an impact on the larger society of Southeast Wisconsin?
Yes, it does, because these people are sometimes disposed of. What I mean by disposed of, once they're put in prison, they have a stigma attached to them. Then we tell them, all right, straighten yourself up, get your life back on track, but we attach an anvil to their back when they come out that will keep them hindered for the rest of their life. They're considered a felon. They're considered black they're considered a ne'er-do-well, and they are last to be hired. And then at every job they go to, they have to sign a slip stating that I was once a felon or incarcerated, which puts them behind the curve. There's no particular race in society that is going to fail and not affect the entire society. We're all bound together by that web of connectivity that Dr. King talked about. So if the black man fails, eventually the whole society will fail.
Michael McCann, does the criminal justice system look at community impact when it decides how to prosecute a crime? Does it look beyond just the criminal and the victim to what the impact on society at large will be from putting someone away?
Yes, but it also looks at what the impact will be if the person is not put away. What's the impact on the community of having people that are going around shooting people or drug dealing in a high quantity? That has an impact. I think that comes first to the attention of the criminal justice system. What negatively is happening and how do we deal with that? I think people generally look to the school system and other systems to make the positive contributions, but I think it's more a case of what happens if you don't. That the attention of the criminal justice system is drawn to a crime problem more than saying, all right, what will be the impact? It's how do we address this crime problem? And if it becomes incarceration, that's the impact we're talking about to some extent. But I think the attention is focused on the crime. That's the criminal justice system's first view.
Before going into prison, do people think about those consequences? When they're going to commit whatever it is they're going to do, do they say, this could send me to prison, or isn't that part of what they think of?
I don't know. It's according to what your mindset is, because like when I was doing what I was doing, you don't think about prison because prison don't mean nothing. You know, it's according to what you call first and burglar. That might be prison to us. You know what I'm saying? This prison is like a state of mind. We're already locked up. So actually, you kind of saved us because I get 3 meals a day. Recreation, you get your teeth fixed or whatever you get, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of people is in a better situation in prison than they is out here, but who set that tone of how the community is, you know? So yeah, you don't really think about that because you hate everybody. So if I hate myself, then I'm gonna hate you. So you know, you don't think about it. It's like you just go and do what you do, and then whatever the consequence is, the consequence. Because all the consequences is after the crime. It ain't before the crime.
Mark Evans, how do you make the case that what happens to you and people in your community makes a difference to people outside. There are probably people listening to this broadcast who live in Brookfield or Oak Creek or outside the city of Milwaukee, and they might say, you know, this isn't about me, this is about them. How do you make the case that it is about them as well?
Well, I guess the example I could give people is that when we're sick, we all seek medical attention. So when you're sick, you go to a hospital, you go to a physician, but until it happens to you or someone in your family, your concern is not there. But at the rate of the United States is going, at this rate, we became the lockup country in the world. And Wisconsin is the #1 lockup state in America for black males. But we 6% of the population and the most incarcerated. So when I was in prison, all I saw was black males. That's amazing. So I would say somewhere along the line, someone in somebody's family is going to be incarcerated, and they have to deal with the tough issues of that. But a lot of time we don't deal with or even know or can articulate what our needs are. So a lot of times we don't even think about others, we just think about ourselves. And as long as it's not happening to us or to me, then my concern is limited, very limited.
Right, that's almost like when you watch the news and a shooting happened in the suburbs. They say, oh, I don't think it never should happen in our neighborhood. I never thought that. I don't know why you didn't think it had happened in your neighborhood. It happened in everybody else's neighborhood. Or even with the heroin. Heroin been in, I'm be 50 this year, heroin been in our neighborhood all my life, and now all of a sudden it's on the news. Heroin, it was like it just happened yesterday, because it's in the suburbs. But it's always been in the suburbs. It was just that now your kids using it instead of just pushing it to other people's kids.
Mr. McCann, when you were dealing with cases in the criminal justice system, what kind of discretion did you have in sentencing men to prison?
Pretty broad discretion. There are some cases where there's a mandatory imprisonment, but for many cases there's broad discretion for the district attorney what to recommend. And the judge, of course, does the sentencing. The DA does not do the sentencing. So there's broad discretion within a district attorney, and charging as well. Charging decisions, recommendations, and so on.
Reverend Brisco, you talked about what you see as the inherent racism of the system, that so many more black men are being sent to prison than people of other races, and there is clearly a disproportionate amount of black men who are sent to prison, especially in this state. But how much is about sentencing and how much is about who's committing crimes? There are people who bring up the issue that yes, there are a lot of black men who are in prison, but there are also a lot of black men who have committed crimes.
First of all, I want to go back to the other question you mentioned. It's the state of Wisconsin prison system, not the city of Milwaukee prison system. That is why the whole state is affected. When you have less access and less opportunity that is centered on one part of the city, you're going to have more hopelessness and more despair than you're going to have in the more affluent parts of the city. When you commit more resources to the affluent parts of your city than you do to the impoverished part of your city, then the people who are impoverished are going to act out and they're going to respond to what resources they have and what access they have. This is not excusing crime in no way, shape, or form, because I've seen people who I knew that prison was meant for them. But when you have a disproportionate amount of people who are going to prison for lesser crimes and for lesser activities, and you see the same people in Brookfield who are getting house arrest or who are getting electronic surveillance, and then you see someone in the inner city getting 9 months or a year for that same crime, there's no way that you can say that it's not racist or it's not disproportionate. So what we are saying is that you have a situation that needs more resources bestowed upon it than you have on the outlying areas. When you have people who are sentenced to prison and they don't get any help, get any treatment, or get any educational advancement, then you're releasing the same person in prison that you put out of prison, that you put in prison, and you're expecting him to do different. That is not going to happen. The only way that prison will cure crime is if you sentence people to life. Everyone that is coming out of prison should come out with a better advantage than they had when they went in.
What's the purpose of incarceration? Is it punishment? Is it correction? Is it rehabilitation? Why do people get sentenced to prison?
I think it's all of those, Joanne. It isn't the disjunctive, it's all of them. It's people who became critical, I don't want to be unfair to the system, it's referred to as the Wisconsin correctional system. Some people disagree with that. There's no question over the years, as we all saw as incarceration rose, less and less resources went, I believe, to rehabilitation in terms of drug treatment programs and so on. But punishment certainly is part of it, but the hope is of society and the structure, the hopeful structure, the idea is that there'll be rehabilitation for that person, that they will come out a different person. But that means resources, and that means a commitment to society ready to commit substantial resources for those reforms. And we've been in an era in the last 20 years where there isn't a lot of that.
Torre Johnson and Mark Evans, did any part of your prison experience make you less likely to return to prison after it was over?
Yeah, I guess after a while, I told you, it's got to be like, I don't know, I say like, I went to a program called Choice Program. And the only reason I went to that program is because somebody convinced me to go, and I could get out early. And it kind of gave me some tools that I already knew, but now I could actually practice them for 6 to 9 months. Then I got out and returned, but I still had them tools to fall back on that I never allowed to be put inside me, because I had people around me that were still trying to get that. But to me, I think that prison is like being in prison more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times, that it's like set up, you know, because you see where the prison's at all up north, and the farms, and I remember somebody walked outside and was like, they sniffed, they said they smelled some boo-boo, and then the guard sniffed and said he smelled money, and then when I went back to my cell, I realized that we were the money, and we was the boo-boo that he was smelling. And if you go to Wall Pond and watch Dodge, Wall Pond, Bunkhouse, Fox Lakes, and see everybody got third shift, it's set up for them people to have jobs. You know what I'm saying? We do commit crime, but like I work in Harambe and River West. But like the Reverend said, if you don't put nothing in Harambe, we gonna go on River West and take something. You ain't gonna have your laptop and your barbecue, and I ain't gonna have none. You know, so it's set up like that. You know what I'm saying? But it's system set up like, I think it's 22,000 or more people in prison. It's over 5,000 people that employed by the Department of Correction, and I ain't counting the POs and all that. And then it's like 70,000 people on probation and parole, so it's just too much money. I went from the police station to county jail to MSDF to Dodge Correctional to way up to Antioch. Everybody was getting paid off of just one person. You know what I'm saying? Antioch, Wisconsin got like 200 people in their county jail, their state prisoners. And I was like, how y'all get all these people in here with this little town? And it's because they getting paid. Everybody got jobs, and they thank you for coming. You know what I'm saying?
Michael McCann, I assume you didn't think of in terms of the economies of the places where the prisons are, but there is a lot of infrastructure right now that goes along with supporting such a large prison population.
There is just we made an effort, I certainly made an effort to push to have a prison built in Milwaukee. You may recall the area was selected in the area not far from the ballpark. That became a political issue against Earl, that they was going to put a prison right in Milwaukee, and that ads were run against that, attacking that. And I had argued that there were ministries here families that would make a difference to have the prison here in Wisconsin, at least in Milwaukee. That there was strong political opposition to that. So the people aren't looking for jobs here in Milwaukee for that. They're looking, well, what will be the impact of that be? I do think certainly there's communities that have those prisons that economically benefit from it. Ideally, the prison should be near the prisoners where the person comes from. So the guards have the culture. There are very few black guards. What black guard wants to live in Waupun or Antigo or something like that? So, or ministries that reach out. So there's no question there should be, but that was tried here. The attempt was made. There was fierce political opposition. You may recall Earl was defeated. Some said, don't close Green Bay, get rid of Earl. So it became that attempt, and there was actually space purchased by the Division of Corrections that was beaten down politically.
As you probably heard, we have a live studio audience. Well, it's not a studio, it's here in the Wisconsin Black Historical Society, a really big room. And we have quite a big audience here. And we welcome your questions too. The microphone's right there, so come up if you have a question. And of course, those of you listening live on the radio can get a hold of us via Twitter, #PrisonImpact. And we may take a few questions through that too, but we have people here who have questions who have already come to the microphone. Good morning.
Hi, my name is Andrea Brown, and I have a family member that's been locked up for 27 years. And he's been past his mandatory release date, and the parole system is holding a lot of guys past their release date, and our parole system has slowed down a lot. So what do we do as a community to help parole facilitate getting these people back out on the street so they can be positive people in the community?
One of the things that I think has affected imprisonment was in fact that the issues of parole, how many people under the system that was adopted, I've forgotten exactly what year it was, they did away with parole to an extent. So it was, the parole board was stripped of authority to release people. Truth in sentencing came online, and there was very little that the parole board could do. If it was within the last 7 years, that may have been for a crime committed much earlier, then you'd be sentenced under that old law. But most truth in sentencing definitely impacted on having more people in prison. The prison sentences were longer, people were held and detained longer. And there was a time when a lot of people were released on parole, but again, there was a political opposition rose to it. Truth in sentencing came online. I can remember exactly when it did. Governor Doyle, then Attorney General Doyle, called me and said he would like to support truth in sentencing up to 80%. You served 80%. When I appeared at a press conference with them, I said I would not do that. Then the governor, Thompson, like 2 weeks later, said we'll have truth in sentencing, but it's 100% time, no 80% time. So that has definitely impacted on the parole. There definitely is much less parole releases, no question about it.
Before we take another question from the audience, let me ask Willie Brisco. Reverend Brisco, are we talking about two different sets of criminals here? I mean, is anyone saying that violent crime should go unpunished or punished in a different way from one community to the next? Are we talking about drug crimes on one hand, for example, and violent crimes on another?
First of all, you have to look at the entire correctional system. For over 200 years, we've known that this has been a failed system that we've been supporting, and nobody has changed it. No one is saying that there's no prison time that a crime does not warrant. We are saying to be more civil and more humane in sentencing, and to be more practical in who you're putting in prison and why you're putting them in prison. First of all, you should put a person in prison you should realize is just to protect the community. And is this person a threat to the community? Is this a person a threat to themselves? And if you can't answer those two things reliably, then you need to find a way to treat that individual. The way we are incarcerating people now, calling it corrections, is a farce. The incarceration time is the punishment. If you don't think incarceration itself is punishment, lock yourself in the room for a day and tell yourself you can't go anywhere. Now multiply that by thousands. That is punishment. If you do not give these people provisions when they're behind bars and give them corrective treatment, to give them the resources they need to become viable in the community, then you just have a recidivism process that's going to feed itself continuously. So yes, there is a need for incarceration for some people, but if those people are coming back to the community, you have to provide a way for them to have a means to alter their lives and to make a living for themselves.
Joel Wenger with MICAH and with WUWM, the statewide organization. I think most people in this room, and certainly the panel members, know about MICAH's and WUWM's 11 by 15 campaign, which is a campaign to reduce prison population in Wisconsin to 11,000. That means cutting it in half by 2015. And people who hear that think that's wild-eyed idealism at best and some crazy plan at worst. But we believe that our prison incarceration rate in Wisconsin should not be any much different from Minnesota's, and that would be bringing it in line. So the question is, what are a couple of the areas that we in MICAH and in WUWM, which is all over the state of Wisconsin, people all over the state are enraged by these rates that are out of line. What are the 2 or 3 areas that we ought to focus on to bring about the change and to solve what obviously is a system that is not working the way it should?
Well, Pastor Elwinger just threw me a softball.
Really?
Knocked it out the park.
You can tell we worked together, so he kind of set that one up. For the first time in history, our correctional budget has exceeded the UW system budget, which means that we're more willing to send someone to prison and pay for them rather than we are to send someone to college and pay their tuition. Because 1 year in prison will pay about 4 people's years, a whole year of college tuition. So it is financially feasible for us to find an alternative that a state right next door to us has found. They have stopped incarcerating people for nonviolent crimes, for drug addictions, for alcohol addiction, for mental illness. They have found treatment for those individuals, and it's working because their budget is less than half of ours. But we still want to say, well, we are tough on crime, and we want to lock people up and throw away the key. Well, people don't disappear when they go behind bars. It costs to keep those people behind bars. Truth in sentencing is costing us a ton of money, destroying a ton of lives. And until we get more, what you might say in the 20th century about incarceration and about treatment, we're going to wind up paying triple what we are today.
Mr. McCann, you talked about the political complications that come in to budgets and where to place prisons. What about the whole issue of being tough on crime? Is that really a political issue, or do we really want to be tough on crime, and that's why we put so many people in prison?
Well, I had a chance to look at not in great depth at the Minnesota thing, and it seemed to me that they were being much more tolerant, particularly of property crime. I don't think a big disparity in violent crime. I don't think there was a big disparity. But in Wisconsin, it'd be 1 or 2 or 3 times you commit property offenses, and then you'd be sent to prison. It seemed to me much more tolerant of that offense in Minnesota. There's no question there's a political, Democrats forever are accused of being soft on crime, and that's a reality. That became, I think that really rose in the 90s as crime rates rose. They seemed to be connected in the 80s and 90s, that idea that it was a political impact, and people were afraid of being soft on crime. I can remember running where you think sometimes governors or presidents were depicted at one point as running decked out as sheriffs running for president of the United States. So there's no question that has had an impact, and that what the legislation is, why we haven't gotten rid of truth in sentencing. Even the modest changes have been challenged. As I recall, the limited authority that there is for a parole board, that's being used very, very, very tightly. And I think definitely there's some political aspect of it.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we will be holding a town hall meeting on specifically on solutions to this issue on May 22nd at the downtown Milwaukee Public Library. And so hopefully we can get into some of these potential solutions in greater depth on that day. But for now, let's take more questions from the audience.
Hi, I am Crystal West. A lot of you probably know me because I work on a lot of different organizations in the highest disparity zip code, 06. Not only do we have the largest incarceration rate, but we have the largest of health disparities. So here's my question. We say that we are not looking to be soft on crime, but yet half of the people who are incarcerated are for nonviolent crimes. We say that we want to help our community, but yet young men who are struggling to already feed and take care of their families, the basics, food, shelter, clothing, things of that nature that every human being should have. But yet we punish them when they say, okay, I have a 2-year-old child. I can only get so much food from the church. I can only get so much money from the blood bank. I go to jobs every day. This is what I'm hearing from our clients. We're Free at Last Ministries. They go to jobs every day, every session. They walk when they don't have transportation. So here's the problem. We're saying we want to help, but yet where's really the help? When a program does come up and it's a great program, all of a sudden funding is stopped. No funding. So when we're talking to these young men and we say, why do they have so many gun charges? These are men in a jungle, literally a jungle. Because when you walk down the street, and I never believed this until it happened. I was walking with a group of young men who all of a sudden another man jumped out and said, what set you're claiming? I'm like, really? I thought that was early 80s. And he's like, no, what set y'all claiming? Y'all can't walk through this neighborhood. Pulled out and brandished a gun and said, you can't come past here. I was like, you have been lost your mind. I live on 10th and Burleigh. I've lived there for 10 years. And there's no way you're going to tell me I can't come. So if you're going to shoot me now. And I'll let God work it out. But the other young man was saying, see what we go through? Now, if you wouldn't have been standing right here, we'd be 3-shot people. Their fear and our fear is 2 totally different things. Young men in this community now are being hunted like animals and then locked away like animals and then released, and they can't take care of their families like animals. And when we say it wouldn't happen in other neighborhoods, that's because here's the reality. It's not allowed in other neighborhoods.
Is this a reality that she's talking about? Is this a reality that you have experienced?
Of course. As we sit right here, this neighborhood is called the Zoo. It's called the Zoo for a good reason. I don't think the former DA would feel comfortable walking down Burleigh at 8 o'clock in the evening. But let's just face it and call it what it is. It's a business, and the product is young black males. And whether they're out there defending themselves or trying to find a job or get something to eat, the odds are stacked against them. There's no resources for them. If there is some resources, like she said, the programs they go to, the funding stops. It's a business. We already know since the 60s that rehabilitation or severe punishment has rehabilitated less than 1%. We knew that with Alcatraz. So we already know that locking them up and throwing away the key doesn't work. Severe punishment doesn't work. Everybody pays. Everybody pays for the business, but only certain people.
But let me ask, would the availability of more social programs, food, health programs, would that keep people from wanting to shoot each other?
Yeah.
Resources.
Yeah, but like he said, and then I know a lot of people know that the 27th Street area is 27th and Center, 27th and Burleigh, Milwaukee police zone. This is like a black zone, so, but ain't no resources here. We got Project, we sit back right next door, but don't too many people walk in there. But this is like one of the worst areas in the neighborhood. And I live in the 53206 zip code too, and mainly because I might move, but so they shoot around there every day. But it's like when she talked about us helping, we had a program at Wisconsin Community Service that we worked with the police called Gang Reduction in Safe Neighborhoods, and it actually was working. And then when the people came from Washington, D.C., and they put up the maps and the graphs and all that and said, oh, it worked, then they walked away. You know what I'm saying? So it's like they pay for the money to, Mr. McCann said, yeah, they said put a penitentiary in Milwaukee, but they know they wasn't gonna do it, but we'll go through that motion, and so y'all can't say we didn't try, because Walpole been there over 100 years, so they tried to put a penitentiary in Milwaukee about twice, and they kicked it down, because they know it wasn't gonna happen, but put it out there, and I'm a part of like helping create a lot of programs, but I said I don't like creating programs that I know that ain't gonna exist tomorrow. It's just here just for that moment, just to say we did something, and that's what it really is, that we put too much money into afterwards, suit the citizen afterwards, like she said about her family member. I think it was like 1996. We used to have regular, where you earn your good time and you get out and you ain't on parole or nothing no more. You just walk away free. Then they made it mandatory MR, and they gave you the good time coming through the door. and you get out and you be on parole. You be thinking you just getting out. Then they went to presumptive MR. So you can make it all the way to your MR, and then they could say, oh no, you ain't getting out. Then they made truth and sentences. To me, truth and sentences is because people like me and him are starting to say we ain't going to prison no more. So we ain't gonna have all y'all decide y'all ain't going to prison no more. You got 40 years, so we know where you gonna be at for 40 years. So when you change your mind to be good, we see you in 40 years. You know what I'm saying? And I got a GED, you know what I'm saying? But they got all these PhDs and master's degrees, act like they can't figure it out, but you can figure it out. You know what I'm saying? That's what the presumptive in my fault.
Reverend Brisco, you had
Amen.
I advocate for social programs, but I advocate more for jobs and opportunity because that is what is lacking in our community. No, I don't want a prison in Milwaukee. I want Northwestern Mutual to be built on 27th and Capitol. I want the trolley to run down 3rd Street. I want the new hotel to be up on 35th and Capitol. I don't want it in the 3rd Ward. I don't want it on Riverwalk. I want the opportunity to come back to this city because you can trace where the crime, the drugs, and the gangs came in when A.O. Smith, Alan Bradley, and Alice Chalmers moved out. There was nothing done to replace that. We can't keep putting crime on the backs of black people when they don't have opportunity. Yes, there are criminals in our community. There are people who violate the law, but most of them don't have an opportunity to work. How many people in here now know somebody that's unemployed, been looking for work for years? Those people don't want to commit crimes. Those people don't want to stick somebody up, but then somebody's going to eat. Somebody's going to get something for their kid for Christmas. We have got to be sane and have got to have common sense on crime and stop trying to be tough on crime. We need to be tough on poverty. We need to be tough on inaccessibility. We need to be tough on ignorance.
And that's why I liked it. What he said when it's like, I used to drive around and see this thing called weed and seed. So if you weed out something, you got to put something back in there. Amen. So when you come home, it still ain't nothing there. So, but what you left too. And it's like when they say rehabilitate me, at that one point, you could never rehabilitate because I was never habilitated. Now you might could rehabilitate me, I ain't gonna do nothing wrong. But you can't rehabilitate somebody that haven't never lived a life.
And build a new Buck Stadium right across the street from here.
Right. Business.
I wanted to reiterate, I agree very much with what Pastor Brisco has said. Right in this very neighborhood, A.O. Smith, it was thousands of employees. It was an AFL union, but it was thoroughly integrated. American Motors down at Richards and Capitol, those were thousands of jobs. UAW union, very integrated. Those jobs are gone. That's just a few of the companies. The deindustrialization of Milwaukee unquestionably has had a role in the impact of what crime has been. The fact that a young man, I started in the system in 1963, you could get jobs. Jobs were available to a very good extent. That has very much diminished. And whether it'll ever come back, I remember when Obama met with the computer guys, someone saying it'll never come back because labor is so cheap outside the country. So that's a real, jobs are better than social programs, I agree 100%. But boy, that's a big time challenge to us.
I like to say, I don't think that building a prison was the answer when our community was voting and wanted a prison. It was about business, and they saw that the prison brought businesses and it brought jobs. So it wasn't that we want a prison here just so people that look like the ones being incarcerated can work in a prison. It was to provide jobs because, again, we back on it again. Business, it's a business, it's a business. And that's what we were thirsty for when those industries left from Milwaukee. So replacing it with another industry with product was not making cars or casts or manifolds, but the product for the prison was flesh, human blood. So let's look at it, unless legislation change, unless we vote people in the office to provide that legislation change, Department of Corrections, Milwaukee court system going to continue to operate, going to continue to conduct business as normal. And it's the people who have to make these changes. It's us.
Let's take another question from our audience.
My name is Marcus Lee, DLC number 364262. I've been staying in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for all my life. I'm 32 years old. I haven't seen change here yet. I mean, I'm struggling daily. And I hear a lot of voices up here talking, saying a lot of nice things, but honestly, let's be real. I mean, right now I'm facing eviction. I got to come up with this money. I got to come up with that. So what do you expect me to do? Watch my kids constantly saying, we want McDonald's, we want this, we want that. And you got to constantly teach them and tell them these. But it's up to that individual. And a lot of people don't understand us because they don't want to get to understand us. And in order to understand us, you first have to sit us down individually. Don't sit us down all together and expect each one of us to tell you our story. Because where we come from is a zoo. We got to live like that. If we don't live hardcore or tough, we're going to die. And then what? Our kids going to suffer without us. And some of us are true blood-like fathers. Me, my crime was third-degree sexual assault. That killed me. That killed me heartily because I couldn't do anything. I still can't do anything. I went to college, for about 2 or 3 years, couldn't pay for college. Business management is what I sought because I felt that's what I needed. Then I started going into my own trade. Still no money to feed myself or to feed my family. And this is my daily attire for a total of 10 years now. This has been my daily attire. This has been my face. And I've been sitting on these streets struggling. I give myself credit because I got off of probation. I finished it, but it took me 10 years, 2 years on the bracelet. That's like 2 years. That's like you just sitting in a cell. So it's, my questions to each and every last one of you up here is, what do you do? What do you do when you have no other options and all the doors are closed in your face? And every time you're sitting there, you go into an interview, someone is telling you, yeah, I'm not gonna hire you, sorry.
Well, what does he do? What does this gentleman do? What's his next step?
Well, I learned that my whole thing is, and I tell other brothers, is longevity is the key to everything, because if you could stay out here, then you could do anything. You know, I used to laugh at the guys that dig in the cans in the garbage, but then survival, when you survive, is all means necessary to survive. So it's like, it's a lot of lack of opportunities out here, but it is opportunities out here. You know what I'm saying? And then, you know, like what you said about your case, it is a door that they just shut closed permanently. But then I done seen brothers that overcame that too, because they never give up. You know, when you give up, that's when you fail. If you always keep trying, you can never fail. And then I also said, I always tell the brothers to go knock on them doors of them people that say they gonna help you. And then you might want to take a list of the people that don't help you, so you can say, when I asked them, this is what happened. Because there's a lot of people around Milwaukee that say, oh, we'll do this for you, we'll do this for you. And I'll walk right up to them and say what you just said to us and say, now help me.
Great answer. I like to extend that. That's a great answer, and faith is the key. I think you should continue, as long as you continue to breathe, I think you should continue to think what and who you believe as your spiritual guidance, and whatever you believe God to be. Faith, man, just as long as you know you're still here for a reason, you ain't giving up, and that's what it takes, that keep going power. And I think that, like he said, keep knocking on doors, keep going, just keep going, because people with Milwaukee gets some of the largest amount of grant money in the faith community and different organizations in the country. So it's in here. We just have to tap into it. You just have to find where it is and hold them accountable. Those programs you see, the ones that you hear talking about, go to those places. Keep asking questions and say, listen, I need this. I'll give you an example. I ran out of gas going back and forth, coming back home from college, and anywhere I ran out of gas, I looked in rural America. I looked and I went to a church and I knocked on the door. I was thinking about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. They gave me gas money to get home. Go knock on a church door. That's what we pay our tithes and our offerings for. Ain't nobody going hungry in Milwaukee. I don't see no people walking around skinny, looking like we eating.
What we have here is an undeclared state of emergency. That's what that young man just stated.
Yeah.
I don't care how many doors he knocked on. I'm sure he done knocked on some doors in those 9 years, and they keep closing. You need to go to some agencies that claim that they're going to help and join them and start working for help and change, because Milwaukee is in a state of emergency, whether they want to state it or not. There are 10 men in his block just like him who go every day and get rejected. And they need for us to stand up and demand that there's something that changed, because we don't have that sense of urgency since we eat every day and we go to a house that has heat. We don't have the threat of being evicted. But somebody has got to get that urgency in their spirit and realize that there are people out there suffering, and that there are agencies that need to be pushed to the limit to do what they say they're going to do. So I go along with that. Go to your church. Come to MICAH. We are fighting for that effort because we have declared a state emergency at MICAH.
Matter of fact, you can come. I got a couple dollars for you right now.
Hey, I'd like to say that now I still be my landlord still be searching me down too now. But I go through rejection too. Even with my job is lovely, but when I go through doors and ask people to do things, they look at my criminal record, MPS, everybody be like, oh, he shouldn't be working with kids, he shouldn't be doing this, he shouldn't do this, but I just don't give up. One thing I refuse to give up, because if I give up and pick the pistol up, that means that's what they want. You know what I'm saying?
Let me, before we take another question from the audience, there's one that came in over social media, and I'll remind you, if you're on Twitter and you're following this, the hashtag is Prison Impact. And let me ask Michael McCann, if discretion is used in the criminal justice system, what does explain such a high rate of black incarceration?
It's for the persons that are going to have committed the crime. There's the difference between, let's take it's tougher when you get into drugs, certain areas where it's hard to, you could see, let's say for armed robbery, most people who commit armed robbery are going to do time in prison. You could study from police reports what percentage, they're simple, what percentage of armed robbers were black and what percentage were white, were unmasked people, and then say, okay, is there a disparity here of how many people are entering into the system? With drugs, it's much harder to do that. And where police resources are committed in the drug area, in neighborhoods where there were, and that's changed now to some extent, but where there was open air drug trafficking, that drew police. Substantial number of arrests. We went through different chiefs of police, including a black, Art Jones, a Hispanic chief, a female chief, a male white chief. So those numbers of black arrests were very continued. From what I could see, the pattern of drug dealing was different in the inner city compared to suburbs. In the inner city, after crack, because crack meant cheap availability, high volume to make profit. And you saw open air trafficking, you saw drug houses that made it very easy for police. And complaints coming in, neighbors complaining like hell, they're selling drugs on my corner. So you had pushing police to stop it. The dealing in the suburbs, much different. Much less violence. No open air markets, dealing in taverns and so on. There's much usage going on, no question, but not the complaints, not the visibility, not the easy arrests. And so you have a volume, a high volume. I think, so it's when you look at it, what is the disparity? Everybody's used the word disparity, not discrimination. But the issue is discrimination in there? And that's a tough challenge. So the certain crimes, it doesn't matter. If you rape, commit murder, do armed robbery, you're going to go to prison in any place, Minnesota or anywhere else. So when you get into nonviolent crimes, then you're looking at sentencing. Is there disparity in sentencing and so on? It's not a simple one package covers it all.
But would you think people in the suburbs would get more involved in this issue if more arrests were taking place in the suburbs?
I think you're seeing it with the heroin, the deaths. People now suddenly, and as you said, their kids are dying from heroin. Now you're getting stories. And there is a much more of an uproar over a white kid dying in an affluent suburb than a black kid dying downtown from Milwaukee. There's no question about it. Media interest, the media focus. Wherever that death takes place, you're going to have law enforcement that's going to be involved in it, is going to be looking at it. So there's no question in terms of should people be much more concerned? Yes. Why do you think some of the people are out in Brookfield? Why are they out there? Because they wanted to leave crime in Milwaukee. We all know that. They wanted to escape that. I don't want to hear about it. I moved out of here. Don't bother me. It's not my problem. That's why I left Milwaukee. That's a lot of the attitude out there. Make no mistake.
Let's take another question from the audience.
My name is Jafar Banda. I'm the president of Community Uprise. It's an organization, and our focus is expungements and working on bills to introduce to uplift the classifications to help with the citizenship restoration. We also are going to assist and work on a grant to help with the driver recovery here in Milwaukee County. The mass incarceration driver recovery is a need to address, and it's the two largest employment barriers in our community. And if politicians want us to vote for them, they want our support, they're going to have to address the mass incarceration, which is the new modern day slavery. A lot of ex-offenders, their rights have restrictions on them just like as if they were slaves, such as voting rights, employment rights, and education. And I just want us to keep in mind that we need to downsize the population of prisoners, and the only way we can do that is create job trainings for them to have, job placements so they won't be subject to the same atmosphere they were in before they were arrested. It's like a recycling bin. A lot of people from these 6 primary zip codes in Milwaukee County, have the highest incarceration rates, and, we don't want them in the same atmosphere they were in before they were arrested. And to take away that recycling ban, we need also to address their future career paths just so they can have equal opportunities upon extraordinary circumstances. We need to help them get their rights back so that way they can have a chance to pursue their dreams and they won't have to suffer for the rest of their lives. And if you look at our Governor Walker, he has ignored and neglected the right to pardon felons, which has dismantled about 11 jobs on the Pardon Advisory Board, which means that he's ignoring felony rights, which are civil rights and human rights. So we probably need to call Governor Walker and ask him for an explanation or for him to reinstate the Pardon Advisory Board, because to me, that's like him being unprofessional and unethical with him ignoring our liberty, our civil liberties of being able to ask for a felony reinstatement for the pardon.
Let me take something off of what you just said about training. We've heard about how when you get out of prison, you can't get a job. When you're in prison, are you trained for any sort of jobs? Are you given any sort of education so that when you get out, you'll be able to go and get work?
At first, it was, it was just like, well, you could press some license plates, but at first, it was like, you didn't have to do nothing. You could just sit there. But you could get a job, but most of the white people got all the jobs in the penitentiary too, the ones that's there, if that's a proven fact. And it's a waiting list to get a job. So they got trainings, but I think like in '96, Governor Thompson was trying to create where you got to work at factories, make gloves, and you know what I'm saying? So really it ain't no training. But then I was with someone, and I think it was one of my supervisors that said that if it's gonna take like GE, some big time corporation to see that it's a problem, because once they start talking about it, then they can change it, because them the employers. We just on the ground level just crying for a job. But I'm like Will Allen said, go out in the yard and grow some vegetables and go outside and sell it. And then, when we start doing stuff for ourselves, then people come in and try to help us, because they don't want you to do it all by yourself without getting that pat on the back too. Amen. So that's what we need to start doing, is coming together and doing it for ourselves. And then, because I tell the people at Collectivo, if you ain't gonna put a Collectivo on King Drive and then you call us to say, hey, we've been robbed 3 or 4 times, but put one down there and let the people respect you and understand that you're trying to give jobs to the community. When I was younger, I watched the King Drive 3rd Street get tore up as a little bitty kid, but then nothing never put back there. Nothing never put back there. So that takes away from us having, when you go down Water Street and Brady Street and now Center Street on the east side of Houghton, everything is there. People got jobs in this life, but then when you come back up there, it's dead. Ponderosa closed, Hoops closed. We lucky to get G's Clippers back, over argument over a parking lot, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, it's nothing there. And when you got nothing there, you ain't got nothing up here neither.
Prison should restrict your movement, not your citizenship.
Amen.
Prison should restrict your movement, not your citizenship. Right. You should not lose your right to vote. You should not lose your right to participate in government. You should not lose your right to work at certain jobs. You should only lose your movement for that period of time. Prison should be, if you go to prison with an 8th grade education, you should leave with a high school diploma. If you go with a high school diploma, you should leave with a college diploma. You should be trained, taught, and educated so that when you come out of prison, you have a better chance than you did when you went in. That is where we need to get smart on incarceration. We need to get smart on this, because right now, we're going to look back 50 years from now and be ashamed of what we did to our own citizens, our own people, by putting a label on them that lasted the rest of their lives and impeded them from being successful in society.
I don't want to take you short, but first of all, I want to remind our audience.
I just want to know, will y'all play supportive roles for expungements and the reinstatement of the Pardon Advisory Board?
Already doing that, young man.
Already. Check.
I want to remind our studio audience that the radio broadcast portion of the show will end at 11 o'clock, but we'll continue the conversation here for another half hour. But let's take one more question before we wrap up the radio portion of the program.
Okay, my question has to do with what it will take to create the political will to deal with this issue in Madison. Mr. McCann talked about the people in Brookfield moving out there to stay away from the crime in Milwaukee. We're spending 2 to 3 times what Minnesota does. You would think that that would be enough to convince people that we've got a problem that's not being addressed. What will it take to get changes made in Madison to get this problem dealt with?
Anybody want to take a crack at that?
I'm out of this system. I retired at the end of '06. I'd like to tell you that I have a positive view of it with bright expectations, and I don't. We know what happened with redistricting. The majority of votes were Democratic cast for the assembly, but the majority of assemblymen are Republicans. So the redistricting effort that was done, so if the Democrats had it, they'd have done very much the same thing. Let's not kid ourselves. I'm not saying that because of the Republicans, but the very adroitly manipulating it, I don't have, and it's a terrible thing to say, but I don't have bright expectations. The next election is, Obama's been under attack since the day he was elected. There's been obstruction thrown up. Every program that he's tried has been obstructed except to bail out the banks. So and we know from the Tea Party that even moderate Republicans are under challenges in the primary system. They're challenging them in the primary. If you're not far enough to the right, we'll run a candidate against you. We won't do well in the general election because you're too far, but we'll be able to beat you in the primary. It's true of the Democrats too. I mean, both parties are drifting, one to the left, more to the right, and it's happening in the primaries. So what's it going to take? Obviously, a major change. One thing I saw that was hopeful, this gentleman, I think his name is pronounced Nygren. He's a Republican. His daughter has had drug problems. And you see suddenly programs supportive of drug treatment and so on. That is to me, that was a positive thing. I don't relish his experience. I feel sorry for him and his family, but that brought, for people who that's a remote experience, what drug problems in Milwaukee, a remote experience. And this last gentleman, the one before him, they couldn't get a job. We have which is hailed as a positive development. You can get on a computer and find out who's got a record. Make no mistake, employers are checking that. Mr. Brisco knows that, Pastor Brisco. Once you got that criminal record, that's a mark. There's a law that says you can't consider that record unless it's connected with a job. A person convicted of child molesting will never get a job driving a school bus. We know that, and everybody agrees with that. But that shouldn't prevent him from getting a job running a stamp press at some factory. But does it or doesn't it? I think it's done covertly, that's going on all the time. That people are saying who's got a record and who doesn't. And that gentleman we all know people like him that have tried like hell, got a family, really want a job, and have this terrible difficulty. That's going on below the radar. People are getting checked and not getting jobs because they have a criminal record, even though it's not connected to the job.
That will be the last word on the broadcast portion of today's Project Milwaukee event, but we invite you to weigh in on the conversation by visiting us at facebook.com/WUWM radio.
We also hope you'll be able to join us in person for our culminating event for Project Milwaukee, this series. It's going to be a town hall meeting at the downtown Milwaukee Public Library on Tuesday evening, May 20th. We'll have details to follow on WUWM.com/Project Milwaukee. Now, to remind you of some other places you can hear what happened today and see some other things, we're going to have the full 90 minutes of this discussion, the hour and then the half hour that's going to follow, on MPTV by this Thursday. So that's online, mptv.org, this Thursday. You can see all of this. And on March 19th, we're going to have a special edition of Black Nouveau at 6:30 on Channel 10, where I will be discussing this issue and some other issues with 3 former inmates who are going to give me their reflections on their time in prison and why they were there.
Thank you to Everett Marshburn and the MPTV staff, and Annalise Hensel and the WUWM staff for the technical and logistical support for today's broadcast.
And special thanks to Claiborne Benson and the Wisconsin Black Historical Society Museum, where we are right now, for hosting our live broadcast. And to the audience who joined us here this morning, thank you very much. I'm Joanne Williams.
And I'm Mitch Teich. Thank you for listening. And so to continue our conversation in this room, let's take another question from the audience.
Okay. Yes, I want to bring up a point that is rarely discussed, and I definitely appreciate WUWM's efforts in bringing up this issue of black male incarceration. But one of the things that hasn't really been talked about as far as solution, keep talking about the politics and what the community can do, and I see mainly the panelists here have been addressing it, but the real issue that is never being discussed is the discretion of the courts and the district attorney's office. And what I would like to really get understanding, do you believe that, Mr. McCann, that the system is fair? Because you already mentioned your disparaging thoughts about change in the political system. But to me, the real issue is your colleagues and what you had the ability to do as well, to have discretion in what you do. Even though the law says this, you can choose not even to address the law. The same way we just had a situation in Milwaukee where 3 white men have choked and murdered a young black male. And the district attorney office has chosen to say that wasn't a crime. Those white males didn't know that the pressure that they were using could injure that young man. And that's the type of discretion that is going on in the courts. People where there's perceived criminal activity, where there's no witnesses in the courtroom. There's nothing but the district attorney and a jury, and the DA is keep pushing issues. And I'm talking to jurors talking about, man, I'm glad I was on, black jurors, they're saying, man, I'm glad I was on that jury. They was about to convict this person. They had no evidence. They just had testimony of one person that said they stole something from the store and they was going to send them away. And I had to explain to them. But still, the judge has the discretion. So what are you doing to talk to your colleagues, and what can be done to change the discretion of summary judgments of judges and of your department and other departments that you used to work for, where they have the discretion to say, we're not going to put them, we're not going to dismiss this charge, but we're going to give you, if you be good for a year and no police contact, this charge will go away, knowing that the neighborhoods are over-policed and that they're going to get police contact, even though you're given this opportunity to remove this particular infraction.
Well, let's
so
see,
what are you doing
what
about
he has to say. Let's see what
Yeah.
kind of answer you can get. Thanks very much for your question.
There's no question there's a lot of discretion in the criminal justice system. It starts with the police officer on the street.
What do you see as fair is what's going on? Is it fair or is it not fair?
I think it's basically fair. It's basically tried that. You could disagree with that, and I understand why you might. I think it's an attempt. The people that I know that are trying to do the right thing. You've got a steady stream, like in the criminal justice system. The judges are turning over regularly. They're not permanently assigned to criminal courts. That turns over. The police situation, with the most discretion, I think, is right on the street. Do you make an arrest or not? Do you go up the alley, investigate what's going on there or not? So there's discretion day one with the police officer. Into the district attorney's office, there's the discretion there to charge or not to charge. When you go into court, it's a decision, the bail, released on bail or not released on bail. When you go into sentencing, sometimes the judge is constrained by legislation, like mandatory, if you're 3rd or 4th drunk driving, you have to sentence a certain person to a certain number of years. But for the most part, most crimes there's not. There's discretion in that. There used to be, when there was parole, widespread parole, when everybody got parole, there was much more discretion on whether there would be how long you'd be held or not. Something that hasn't been touched upon is the revocation process. In virtually across the board, virtually half the persons that go to prison are sent there by the Department of Corrections. They're revoked on probation, they're revoked on parole, so that that's a steady stream. There's discretion there in the Department of Corrections. Do you revoke or not revoke? So the system is loaded with discretion. That's the reality of it. And I don't see where I've seen that limited has been not to promote less approach is to get more severe, to say control sentencing so the judges are more severe. What the push has been, certainly in the last 20 years, maybe it's tapered off in the last some years, but get harder and harder in the system. That's what truth in sentencing was about. Stop the parole, stop the discretionary releases, make that guy serve 100% of his time. So even if he's changed, everybody that goes into prison may get worse, may get better, but we all know you got a 20-year sentence, my God, you're going to change during that time. And at parole, you can say, all right, a parole board, all right, let the guy go. He's done, he's made, we believe he should be released, that discretion. That was done away with, so that there would be, so the limitation, the discretion in many ways can be used for good or it can be used for bad. But the whole system is heavy with discretion. There's no question about it.
How do we change that? That's what I asked, because that's what is affecting black males in the prison is white decisions against black males, or even people of color judges. I've seen black judges do the same behavior, speak on the community radio station about I understand the community, but when I observe them in the court, they use this broad discretion where people plead for one thing. Now I hear them speak with their public pretender or public defender in the beginning, and they don't realize they're going to jail because their public pretender told them you just have to do this. They agree to the plea deal. And then the judge say, are you aware that by agreeing to this, you release your rights? And then the judge bank them with the whole thing. Yeah. Push a button or something underneath. I don't know how they do it, but all of a sudden bailiffs come in out of nowhere and the person is moved out. And you can tell on their face that they didn't know they were going to jail that day.
Can I respond?
Let's see if the gentleman up here can give you some answers to that.
I'm saying the discretion is the key.
Okay.
The community piece, and he's this wiggling around that issue that we need to address the discretion.
I think that the discretion is also a key, but we're dealing with a broken system. Let's just call it what it is. It's got patchwork. It's got, you're riding on it. The system is a car that's riding. It's broken. The only justice I got is when a jury of the community said, let that man out of prison. When we plead guilty, this is where it starts. Don't plead guilty. Let the jury decide. Take your chances with a jury better than, okay, well, we need to change the laws where our laws reflect the federal guidelines where a jury decide, a grand jury.
Let's let somebody else ask a question, would you please? Thank you very much.
I'm going to say it's the discretion of the judge to give even the jury.
One way is to look at it is where in the federal system, a grand jury decides whether or not someone is charged. So I think we need to go back to that and put the power back in the people's hands and take it out of systems. Because let's face it, the system is not a person, and everybody's just paying their part, and we're talking about human lives. Whether Democrat, Independent, Republican, special interest groups, we're talking about human lives, and we should have better accommodations for human lives in destroying them or proponing them or whatever we do, uplifting them. We should have better humility about human lives, and I think. And one way is to allow the people, put the power back in the hands of the people, because the politicians, the legislators, the senators, everybody has their special interests, and it's not always reflecting what we want for our communities. And so let's play the game. If we're in a game because they're playing it well, and the resources going to continue this system, why are we steady buying into a suppressive system that's suppressing our communities, especially in the black community? Why are we steady paying homage to a system that's not working? It's not a state of emergency today or 10 years or 20 years. It's been a state of emergency in Milwaukee for over 50 years.
Well, Reverend Brisco, I think he has some thoughts about that.
The thing about it is the more money you have, the less time you do. The more able you are to get a competent attorney, the less able time you are going to go to prison. That is a failed system. The recovery system is only one system in our society that we hold that has to be perfect.
Yes.
If one probation violator commits a crime, it sends fear throughout the whole community. Now every infraction sends that person back to prison, or a person related to it. We all remember the Willie E system during the presidential election. Wasn't even in the Midwest, wasn't even in the West, but one person's crime while out on probation affected the whole system. It's fear. We should not be sentencing people based on fear or based on popularity. We should have some people in politics who have guts to stand on principle rather than to try to protect the interest of fearful people. We got people going back to prison because they visited their child when they shouldn't have and was in contact with their girlfriend. Nothing happened, but it was an infraction, so now you go back to prison. That's stupid. That's idiotic. That's a failed system. We should not be sending people back to prison who haven't committed a crime, and we should not be putting probation inexorably on somebody for 10 years in a community that's over-policed because they're going to run into police contact. That's a failed system.
I dare say there are... I dare say there are people in the audience who are probably not old enough to remember the Willie Horton situation, but it certainly, for a generation, there are many of us who do remember that very well. But let's take another question from the audience.
My name's Sam Graff, and I'm a graduate of MPS, and I go to UW Milwaukee. And I work on campus. I spend most of my time on campus, even though I've spent the last 20 years in this city. And it's very obvious to anyone who spends a large amount of time on the East Side that you can pretend like Milwaukee is just the East Side. When new freshmen come onto the campus, they are told what they should do in Milwaukee, where they should spend their time, where they should spend their dollars. A lot of times when I speak to my friends from high school about these issues, they talk about the issues being centered in the inner city, in those 3 zip codes of the most problem, and they talk about the solutions needing to come there. I was wondering if our panelists had any opinions about what the students at UWM whose education isn't being as valued as much as the punitive systems are. If you had any advice, any programs that you think are already in play that are having an effect, anything where we can stop living in that bubble and acknowledge all of the citizens of Milwaukee that right now we are not.
Well, I have a pleasure of, like, at the Hope Youth Center, a lot of interns from UWM come and they get the shock of their life. But they also love being there after a while. There's only like one person I know that said they couldn't deal with it. But most of the students come and be with the children. They love it, and they come back. Some is more stronger than others, and some come from places that they never really even seen black people until they came to Milwaukee to come to school. And that's a beautiful thing, and it's an eye-opener. And they walk through the neighborhood, sometimes with us first, and then some refuse to be escorted. They'll take the kids out themselves. And that's one thing that you can ask them to do more of, is to volunteer in different organizations and actually see it for themselves. Because once you touch a person and feel it, and then when them kids come, and then you experience when they come and might tell you they've been raped or robbed or beat, then you know the truth that something really happening. So you see it for yourself, and you ain't just hearing it, because when you can hear it, you can walk away from it so easily. And when you see it and be a part of it, you can't.
The greatest opportunity for change we have comes from 2 institutions, from the church and from our educational systems. You have the ability to change the perception of the people that you are going to school with. Your school has done one of the most comprehensive studies of black incarceration to this date. Get involved with that. We don't need sympathy and empathy. We need participation. We need for citizens to get involved, because this is all of us. And you are going to be that future that's going to change this. Yourself and other young people who are going to see that this is a wrong system and who are going to go to school and study and change it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Brostoff, and first of all, thank you all very much for coming and discussing this important topic with us today, and for your expertise on the panel. I grew up also going to MPS and UWM, and a lot of the kids that I went to school with had a very different trajectory than I did, based off of one very simple thing, and that is a law that I never understood and I'd like to get some insight into today, and that's the criminalization of marijuana. A recent ACLU study shows that African American males in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin, rather, are more than 6 times as likely to go be arrested than their white counterparts, even though usage is the same. So when I talk to people about it, they say, well, it's not a violent crime. People aren't committing violent crimes with marijuana. No, the crimes are not violent. The enforcement is where the violence comes in. How about the violence in our communities where people aren't able to get jobs after that? How about the violence after someone goes through a system that's going to make them more violent, that's going to get them, recidivism rates up, that's going to get them into these situations where they're around people they really shouldn't be around and weren't around their whole lives? How about the violence to the psyche and the soul of our community? The violence is not in the crime, the violence is in the incarceration. And if Washington, Seattle, you went to the Super Bowl, Colorado, Denver, we have Washington, D.C. going through it. When is it going to happen in Wisconsin? How much longer can we wait? That's my question.
Great question.
Does anybody want to take a stab at the issue of the criminalization of marijuana and how it plays into this cycle?
I want to say something which I think was a positive development. I'm not answering across the board. This is historically, it goes back to the time that Art Jones was chief of police. What was happening was the suburbs were changing their laws and the police practice. They were using ordinances to prosecute marijuana possession. Now, we're not talking about sale, possession, which meant you'd have no criminal record. Milwaukee had no ordinance. And I, with Chief Jones, and it was the disparity in the impact on the person, so that the kid in the suburb walked away without a criminal record, didn't affect the job as much, but his kid in Milwaukee picked up a criminal record for possession. And there was a fight in the Common Council, but the Common Council did adopt an ordinance and Jones supported it, I supported it, so that we wouldn't be charging a crime in Milwaukee for one act and a misdemeanor and a ordinance forfeiture in the suburbs for a different act. That was an improvement. The decriminalization, what I would hope would happen right now is that, I don't know if it's going to happen or not, that the legislature would fund a serious study over the next 6 months so that when the new legislature meets in January, study, and I mean put up some real money to travel out to Colorado and Washington, do interviews, watch what's happening, what's the impact, to come back with an informed assessment of what's happening and what should we or not do, because that's my opinion. Whether that's going to happen or not, I do not know.
But do we have the political will to do that? And what can people who are listening and watching do to make sure that our people who make the laws
I think there's probably
do it?
Both ways, Joanne. I have not made up my own mind. I'd like to see what happens. What's the impact? There issues have been raised about driving. What's the impact? How will we be able to deal with people driving under the influence of marijuana? How will we be able to investigate? Will there be a widespread problem of that in Denver and in Colorado and Washington? I would hope that would be intensively studied, lay the facts out and what's happening. I myself have not made up my mind on it. I did definitely make up my mind that I supported an ordinance for possession here, not legalization, but we don't like to use the term decriminalizing it, but once it became an ordinance and was prosecuted an ordinance, it was no longer a crime.
I'd like to answer that this way. What happens when you put someone in jail for possession of marijuana with the criminal who has killed someone? What happens when you put someone who has a joint of marijuana in jail with a rapist and a molester? What happens when you take someone who has just left a high school dance or something with marijuana on him and put him in jail with a child molester? Those are common sense things that we have to look at, because one of those people do not belong in jail.
I just think too that I mirror and reflect on the question and the answers given. For me, maybe I'm by myself on this, but I'm just tired of spending money on surveys, researches. We know it's a problem. My tax dollars is steady going to people talking. I'm ready to, I'm not afraid, I'm not scared. I'm ready to stand and take a stand on what's wrong in my community and our community at large. I'm tired of spending money sitting around talking about stuff. I'm tired of paying my taxes for these research programs and ain't nothing changing. We, the people, need to get out and do what we've been doing, because we created the problem, we have to solve the problem. The problem ain't gonna solve itself. And no matter how many times we spend billions of dollars looking at the problem, it ain't going nowhere. So I'm tired of spending money. It's time to action. It's time for action. Everybody has something to do. And if we, like Joanne just asked the question, how do you get Congress? How do you get government to go for it? Well, we are government, we the people. If we the people can't change and make change in our communities and our country at large, then we need to change our government. They're doing it all over the world. If it's not affecting us and providing the care we need for a safe community and able to move around with our liberties, then we need to change it. And that's happening in this country.
But let me ask you this, and I think obviously you're right that we have the ultimate way to choose. We can elect different leaders, but the entire state elects these leaders. If you were to go out to one of these communities, I don't know why we're picking on Brookfield, but Brookfield, or if you were to go to someplace outside of the Milwaukee area and explain exactly this, what's the case that you would make to a voter who looks at Milwaukee and says, oh my God, Milwaukee is just rampant with crime, and the answer can't possibly be to lock fewer people up?
First, I think that, not to get around your question, I wouldn't go out to another community. I would stay in this community and say they don't have a bar on or two bars within a 5-block radius in Brookfield. They don't have a liquor store, seven liquor stores in a 10-block area in Brookfield. They don't have those type of things going on, so you don't have that type of mentality. You don't have, they will go somewhere or not go nowhere at all. It wouldn't be a part of the environment. So Brookfield, Menominee Falls, any other, those communities, you don't have different foreigners coming in their community being allowed to have businesses and the money going out of that community. In Milwaukee, in this community, all my life, from every foreigner that came, they come here. This is the stop. In the community, they provide the stores on every corner, the gas station. Everyone comes here and profits from this community, including the prison boom. This is a business, and until we look at it as a business and stop, until we look at it as human beings and stop looking at it as a business or a survey or a system, it's going to continue to happen, and people are going to continue to suffer and die.
Well, so you won't.
I would like to add to that. I like to beg to differ. We do have to leave out of Milwaukee. On the 20th of January, I spoke to a crowd twice this size in Wausau, Wisconsin, and I did not change my speech at all. I did not change my demeanor at all, and they understood what I was saying. Somehow, we have got to take this message outside of this community to this entire state, because most of them think we are a foreign country here in Milwaukee. They think that what happens in Milwaukee does not happen all over. There were only about 10 black people in that audience, and I did not tailor my speech to those black people. I tailored it to the citizens of Wisconsin. We have got to be bold enough to take this message to Waukesha, where they're conservative, take it to anywhere where they think that Milwaukee is a foreign country and that we don't exist and we're not a part of this state. Because if one of us perish, we all perish.
Torre Johnson, briefly, we have 2 questions left in about 10 minutes.
You know, I was like in agreement. You know, when you ask that question, it's gonna be hard, because like when my man was talking to E. Michael McCann, it ain't broken to the people that fixed it like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard that we say it's broken, but the people that we talking to, it ain't broken because they fixed it like that. If I fixed up something and you say it's broken, like my hand is broken, you know what I'm saying? So you might notice it, but to me, since I could work it, it ain't broken. You know what I'm saying? So if I go to Brookfield and say it, they ain't seeing it broken. If I go to Wall Pine, it ain't broken. You know, it's like when you go to Wall Pine and them other counties, they get some type of count for each inmate that's in their prison. They count us. We might can vote, but they count us. So if it's 2,000 prisoners, they say they add that to their count. So that we helping them. So why would they want to fix something that we say is broke? Because it ain't broken to them.
Well, let's take another question. We have 2 questions remaining, please.
I have 2 comments. My name is Lucy Hawking, and I'm a public school teacher in Racine. The reason I'm not in the classroom today is this is our spring break. So I'm really happy to be here. 2 things. Many of us in Racine are reading a book called The New Jim Crow. Michelle Alexander, I recommend it to anyone who's listening and to the audience here. As a child of the 50s, I didn't experience the real Jim Crow until my parents, my dad worked at Ellis Chalmers, took us to a family vacation in Southern Maryland. And we went to a Catholic church right past a brand new Catholic church that the people we were with said they'd built for their black people. And we went to a ramshackle old church, Catholic church, And I'm sitting there sweating, wondering why people are sitting in the air-conditioned church and why we're sitting with all these white folks. And that was my first real exposure to Jim Crow. And there were some very other discriminatory things that my brother and I experienced as white children, wondering about why these black people are treated this way. Our parents didn't have the talk with us before we went south. And when we were there, we had the talk. And we realized that's why my parents did not retire to Southern Maryland, because they did not believe in treating black people the way it was. Now we have, this book has opened my eyes about a new Jim Crow. And as you're saying, there are plenty of folks who like it the way it is. And if people look historically to the 50s, 40s and 50s, that this new getting tough on crime was the new way of talking about racism and keeping the races separate. So the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander. The other point they like to bring up as a teacher, a reading teacher, so of course I've got to suggest a book, is we know the achievement gap, whether it's in Racine or Milwaukee. And I know from some of the research that many of the people that are incarcerated, especially black men, really have struggled in high school. There's a huge dropout rate if they make it to high school. And that reading, math, writing is a real problem. So when we're looking at where we're putting our money, into prisons or into education, especially in the state of Wisconsin, I think this is a really important discussion to have about preschool all the way through K-12, so that more people can be educated and not have the problem we have now. And in prison, I heard you say, there really needs to be a place for GEDs and getting, which are tougher to get now, by the way, if people don't know, GEDs in high school and college diplomas. So I applaud you and thank you for being here.
Well, we should know, Mark Evans, you actually got your degree while you were in prison.
Yes, I actually took the initiative to seek higher education because I know it's the foundation, it's the catalyst to for a change individual, because without being educated, without learning or being able to articulate what my needs were, I was clueless. So it involves a maturity, and you have to want to. And I think you're absolutely right. It starts at education. Our children are trained, whereas little Elijah Wan in first grade may push a chair and run away from the teacher. It's recorded and documented. But if little Tommy does the same thing, oh, little Tommy don't do that. It's no history of it 15 years later. I look back as I matured and understood the system and saw that, why would they record this when I was in kindergarten? I didn't understand it. So yes, it's a racist system. Let's talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it, we can leave the room. Let's talk about it. It's a disparity, and it starts in the education. And education in this country is a great thing. We need it in the world. You need education. But those who it's afforded to is the question in this country. So let's just be real. What kind of education are we getting in our communities compared to the education that they're getting abroad?
I know I saw the sign up, there's 5 minutes or less. But I'm saying, gosh, I'm a state representative, and thank you so much for everything you've said, and it just really rings true. And I just have a few facts and then maybe a question, but we had the recent WEDEC study of where jobs were created across the state, and in Waukesha there were 7,000 jobs created. In my district, none. In LaTanya Johnston's district, none. There are not jobs being created in Milwaukee by this effort, so you're absolutely correct on that. We have to invest more in jobs. And I know one of the things that we can do is get people out to vote, as people have mentioned over and over again. Yet we are going to be having legislation voted on in the Assembly next week. Well, actually, it's voting in the Senate, and it may come back to the Assembly, that restricts people's right to vote. More and more efforts to restrict people's right to vote. So I just want people to understand how that impacts changing the system too. And then lastly, I did introduce a bill with Senator Harris on racial impact studies being done for any new legislation or any changes, because when I got to Madison, I realized that there was no law out there that many people did not want to make tougher. And I think Ms. Williams asked, do people know the consequences? And I asked that too. Do people carry around a little code book with them and say, well, I better not commit this crime because that's going to be a higher level felony than if I do this crime? And they don't. They don't. And it doesn't deter crime. So the racial impact study does not look like it will be going anywhere, but just your thoughts on having something that when we do make laws tougher or introduce new criminal laws, on having a study. It would be the same as an environmental study. We do that. We do fiscal impact studies, but we don't do one based on race.
We run from it. We run from it because it supports, that study will expose the disparities. It would expose the system as what it is. We don't need no exposure. We already know. Why we're not doing anything about it is the question.
Again, that's going to have to be the last word on today's Project Milwaukee broadcast. We do invite you to weigh in on the conversation by visiting us at facebook.com/WUWM radio and join us for a town hall meeting Tuesday evening, May 20th.
And you can see the 90 minutes of this broadcast, the WUWM live radio broadcast that we just concluded, and this additional 30 minutes on MPTV. It'll be streaming on mptv.org. beginning on Thursday, March 13th. You can watch all of our conversation. And then on Black Nouveau, this coming Wednesday, I'll have a conversation with 3 inmates about their experiences in prison, all part of Project Milwaukee, a combination of WUWM Radio and MPTV. Thank you very much for joining us.